everyone, Tactics here with another advanced Mythic Plus guide for Season 2 of Dragonflight, where in this video I'll be going over Uldaman Legacy of Tyr, walking you through a plus 20 Tyrannical key from week 1 of the season, kind of discussing the pulls we did, our strategies on the various bosses, lust timings, routing decisions. We'll just hopefully just giving you some good tips to get this dungeon timed on higher key levels. As with my entire advanced guide series here, this route is not really meant for pugs. It's more for coordinated groups pushing higher keys, that kind of thing. But if you're looking for pug specific content, I have simple, easy to execute routes over on my channel, and I'll link them down in the description as well. Otherwise, let's get started here, where initially we do a pretty significant pull off the top tier, but we do opt to hold Bloodlust. I think definitely on Tyrannical keys, but there's an argument as well for Fort keys to at least be lusting the Bromok Trog boss initially. We'll talk about it in a second. In terms of this trash pull, the Geomancer is the big one here. The Chain Lightning is a kick or a stop, and otherwise you want to just keep as many kicks as you can on those Storm Bolts. That's just extra tank damage, basically. We do have the healer go ahead and add a couple Geomancers in, as all those Leapers tend to die. They do a little bit of random damage, but not much else, so you can pretty easily add in more Geomancers to this first pull, and especially because the pull after this, my guess is you're going to find a way to skip it in higher Fort keys in particular, because the triple Basilisk pull is probably one of the most dangerous like tank pulls with such a low mob count in all of Season 2. They deal a stacking bleed essentially on the tank, so you can dwarf it off, you can evoker it off, but then from there on, if you're not a paladin who can immune it off as well, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, especially if you get unlucky and you like don't parry or dodge or whatever and you get a big 3 stack on you. It's just a pretty dangerous pack, and there's definitely count later on in the dungeon you can use to make up for it. We do end up pulling it here, you're going to see. But it's super dangerous, and especially on like a Fort week like it is right now on live servers, Fort bolstering, this is a pretty spooky pull. When it comes to actually these kicks, so the Spike Carapace is a kick or a stop, but we also have a Purge in our group, so we do that as well. Notice here the Chain Lightning, we didn't quite kill this mob and basically forgot about it. That would have been very dangerous on a higher Fort key, so just be aware of that. If you are chain pulling, you need to make sure one person is kind of waiting behind and kicking these mobs in, because obviously the LOS only gets you so far. I could have potentially moved up an LOS over here around this way, and that would have caused them to come up a little bit more, but just be aware of it. It wasn't lethal here. But the scary thing are these chomps, right? So you see, I got pretty lucky there. I think I parried. No, I'm bubbled right now. I'm bubbled. Never mind. No luck. But before I was getting bleed stacks, of course, I procced my Guardian there as well. Had to immune. But it's just a scary pull. And this is on a Tyrannical week. So definitely way scarier on a Fort week, but otherwise here we're moving ahead. The double Basilisk surprisingly isn't nearly as scary. It's really the triple one that kind of pushes it over the edge here. So this is just another Geomancer where we're getting kicks. We want to make sure we're stopping that Chain Lightning. The Berserker guy, note this bar on the HP, I believe it's 40%. That's when he enrages everything. And this guy in combination with the Basilisks, it's what's really scary for tanks here, because if you already have active bleeds out on you and they get enraged, it's just going to enrage that bleed for as long as that bleed is up, right? So very scary here. Disease Bite, on the other hand, very not scary at all. It's also a movement speed thing, so it can be cleared with like Freedom, it can be cleared with like Tiger's Lust, that kind of thing. So you're not really super worried about it. It's really just those chomp bleeds that are really scary. And like I said, particularly when the Berserker here enrages, it's going to be spooky. So you can see we're actually nuking down the Basilisks to try and mitigate that. I just lost the 2 stack of bleed, and then they got enraged, makes it way less scary. But even just a single bleed here, it's still ticking relatively hard, right? So you want to just be aware of that. From here, this is just another double Geomancer pull, but we're going to bring in this to the next pack. The Leapers, like I mentioned, don't really do a ton, and this is another situation where you want to be aware of those kicks. We're getting kicks as we're moving into the pack here. Another double Basilisk pull, but because there's no Enrage guy in this pack, they're much less scary. And so what you're going to see here is as soon as we kill these Geomancers off, we're going to chain into the next pack, because there's one more Geomancer in that pack, and balancing 3 sets of kicks is probably a bit too much for the vast majority of comps and groups. Even for a prop paladin group, it'll be tough to balance 3 sets of kicks with everything else. So you see, we're starting to get those guys down. They're all almost dead. And then we pull these guys in, double berserker, one more caster, and luckily we're not too worried about the enrage here from the basilisks, or the basilisk getting enraged, sorry, with the bleed, because the berserkers are so much higher health, and this just gives us a little bit more cleave efficiency. And as you can see here, it's going to be about 3.5 minutes to first boss here, so it's not like we were holding Bloodlust for a really long time. On a fort key, that could be a bit longer, but I'm guessing you'd maybe do something like shroud some packs, skip some packs. So I'm talking about that triple basilisk pull, that kind of thing, just to get through it a little quicker here, and then you could still lust this boss, because this boss is a tough one. So let's move forward just a tad bit here. So this boss is very, very tight in that you need to be able to swap your damage ASAP. So what's going to happen here always is that where you have the ad spawns, and what I recommend is if you have a range kick in your group, I would always assign a range kick to kick the Geomancer first. There's, as you can see here, 24 plus seconds between calls of the deep, which means a standard range kick is fine to get it. Obviously, like a Shadow Priest Silence or a Boomkin Beam is not going to work, but any standard ranged interrupt will always be up to kick the first Geomancer cast, and then that'll automatically group them. On top of that, we have another person in our group assigned to always stop the Chain Lightning cast. Again, one melee kick is fine for this. Probably a range kick as well would be fine for it, because they don't cast it too often or too frequently. But otherwise, every other kick basically is on me, and then there's free kicks that we have that we aren't using that are also just going to be sent if you're ever worried about anything. But again, just like the Geomancer the trash mobs rather, these guys are just going to hit the tank unless it's a Chain Lightning. So that's why we have the one defined kick assigned to the Chain Lightning, and all the others are just going to be me outside of the very first one, which is sometimes me, but sometimes I would just assign a range kick to it, like I said. And so here's the Quaking Totem. So this is kind of the name of the game here. When the Quaking Totem comes out, you need to immediately swap to it. The goal here for Quaking Totem timings is to kill the Quaking Totem, if you can, before Bloodlust. That's less of a big deal. The real big one is doing it before the next Call of the Deep. It buys you so much free time where you're not worried about things, trogs jumping around, people taking damage. So we swap instantly over here, and you can see here our range positioning. Notice how our range DPS are positioned just outside of this Quaking Totem area. That means that when the ambushers jump out like this, they'll come immediately back into this circle, because they need to be in this circle to actually be stunned. So that's the reasoning for the ranged positioning here, because these guys are going to jump out to ranged. If the ranged are like super far away, your cleave is way less efficient. So range positioning relatively close to this Quaking Totem helps to make that way more efficient, and it also helps to get these mobs actually stunned by the Quaking Totem here. So you see, we are a tad slow. Most of those mobs did just instantly die though. And so now we're dealing with this, and we don't get a free burn here, but potentially if you're able to control this, it's really not too bad. It just, you lose the breathing room time. But if you don't need the breathing room time, it's fine. Obviously, again, we have the kick available because I'm a paladin. I can Avenger Shield the first Geomancer, but I would recommend having just a range kick hard assigned to the first Geomancer. Pick up all these ambushers, bring them right on top of the boss, and just blast them down. You have a ton of time here, and so the big thing is just making sure that you pop defensives when there's ambushers and a Quaking Totem up, because you're going to see here, like in 10 seconds, like when this Quaking Totem goes up, it is very, very high damage. Even on a fort key like this week, the damage is very, very high. So being able to have defensives available for when that pulsing ray damage goes out is very good. Obviously here, because we had that ad spawn, we had so much time between the next Quaking Totem. Those ads just kind of melted even though we weren't focusing them. So pretty much here, you're focusing the Quaking Totem whenever that spawns. Position yourself when you have ads up to be relatively close. Otherwise, slam the boss the entire time. Don't really focus on ads, because outside of the kick, there's not really too much danger, I don't think. The only danger is the overlap with the ads and the totem. So we commit Bloodlust here. We nuke this boss down ASAP, and it just kind of rinse and repeats from there. So super scary, so just make sure you prioritize that, and that's why we Bloodlust this boss. Oh, too far. Okay, now we go back to the dwarves. So we basically just backtrack a little bit. Run over to the dwarves. Very simple boss here, honestly, not too much going on. You want your range to not usually play too far out, because Eric is going to jump at one of them with his Skullcracker. Otherwise, just make sure that you have, is it Baylog? Yeah, Baylog faced away from the group here. You see I'm faced into this wall here. He's going to wild cleave, and see, we baited that Eric the Swift jump like right beside us for good uptime. Now I'm going to keep Balog faced into this wall here for the arrow. So this arrow is going to go off face directly into the wall, and that means I can just rotate around. He's going to keep facing the wall, and we just have free cleave. So that's kind of the name of the game here. Maintain your uptime as best you can. These swirlies are baited on players here, so we tried to stay relatively close together to get good baits here. You can see we're all down here. We're baiting, we're baiting, we're baiting. And we don't have anyone like randomly baiting stuff, like cutting us off in the middle here, right? So we're all baiting together, all baiting together. We're going to get to here, and that's where the guys all come out. They always come out here for this first boat, and it's just good cleave, right? Not a lot of issues having them grouped. This cleave is going to go off, then I'm going to move here, as you can see. And again, all clear space because we had good baits here. So keep that in mind. The big thing here is just controlling where you're actually putting that fire, and then making sure you're not like frontaling people with the arrows, with the cleaves, and the ranged are baiting decently so that Eric the Swift doesn't run across the room through a bunch of fire, right? Ideally as well, you kill these guys at roughly the same time because they'll go up at 10% HP to back into their boat. So keep that in mind, but it's not really a big deal when only 1 or 2 of them are in the boat. Easy boss, in my opinion. One of the easier ones probably of Season 2. Nothing too crazy there. Then we get into the trash after Bromok now, so we run back again. So you do lose a little bit of time for run back in exchange for some better lust timings. We'll have to see how that plays out. There's probably a world where you like lust the first pull, do a bunch of stuff, and maybe you lust late on Bromok on a higher like tyrannical key kind of deal. I can totally see that being a thing. Otherwise, though, custodians here, taking the bleeds is pretty scary here. So you see, I commit bubble here, and we have our priest run down and get this third custodian just to have 3 of them. But otherwise, like when I'm out of cooldowns, you're going to see I'm just going to constantly backstep these custodians and basically never take a bleed, because these guys function a lot like if you guys remember the matriarch from Temple of the Jade Serpent before the second boss. Basically, you can just backstep, and it doesn't put the spell on cooldown, but you don't get hit by it. So you're going to see all these like Jagged Bite casts. They go out, but then I just back up, and I take no Jagged Bite debuff. And so that's definitely what you want to do for these Refty Custodians, especially as they get this damage amp stack. It will go away when you stun them, and they do take extra damage when you stun them. But still, it's just not really something you want to be taking here. It is a bleed, of course, so you can bleed dispel it. You can, bop it off, use the Evoker Dispel, whatever, bubble it. But honestly, it's just not something you really want to mess with, especially here. 6 stacks, just like a fortified 6 stacker or like a bolstered or anything like that. You don't want to mess with that at all. So I'm just avoiding the bite entirely here, and we're just going to chain into the boss. I'm going to continue avoiding this bite here, or I'm going to get hit in the face. Oh, I have Sentinel up, and we stunned it. So that's kind of what happened there, and it's dead. So easy there at the end. And now we have this boss here, and this guy is pretty straightforward. Basically, he's got 2 stacks of Indomitable. You need to get rid of those stacks to prevent his big cast, but you want to do that as late as possible because it does give him a damage amp that stacks. And so basically here, you need to be careful depending on your comp. There are specs in the game that have random stuns available like in their kit. For like, I think a common one, of course, Destrolock, they have those stuns. I think Feral, when they do their re-stealth thing, they also will stun sometimes. So be aware of that. Those will take stacks away. And if you ever have a problem where this guy's randomly getting stunned early, it's probably something like that in a specs kit. So just be aware of it. For us, what we do here is we have the boss eat 2 orbs to sit on 0 stacks. And then what we do is we commit a player stun, so kidney shot, Hodge, that kind of thing, to interrupt this Titanic empowerment relatively late in the cast. Honestly, you can milk that much longer than I did too as well. Like, those extra seconds really, really do count, because it's a 5-second cast. If you interrupt that 5-second cast, either before the cast goes out or at 1 second left on the cast, right, you're buying yourself 5 to 6 seconds per rotation, which is a lot of time if you're doing like 5 rotations on the boss, right? So keep that in mind. It's definitely beneficial to milk that cast, and that is kind of why we opt to use a targeted stun as our third CC on the boss instead of walking the boss through one of the orbs, because just timing having the boss walk through late in this cast is kind of tough, right? And so it's much less finicky and just easier in general to do those 2 first and then use a player stun as the final one. So that's what I recommend here. Otherwise, boss is pretty straightforward. Actually, one thing I do want to mention. So a super dangerous aspect of this this boss, are the bleeds, the random target bleeds. And so for us, our comp is actually kind of built relatively decently around that. So the stones on this boss go down a random player here, and the really scary overlap of this boss is when the stones go out and then he stomps. So I believe, I don't know if this first one is actually that overlap. It's not. So it's the next one that's the overlap. So he just stomps there, and then you're going to get a bleed into a stomp after this. So there's the bleed going out, and then there's the stomp going to come shortly after while the bleed is still out. So this Dragon Nugget is still bleeding here, and he's about to get stomped. So it's that's kind of like the scary moment here. He got GS'd there. That's what happened. But this is where having things like a Paladin who can bop, bleeds off, dwarves who can cleanse bleeds off, or evokers who can cleanse bleeds off, they are going to be so powerful in this dungeon because of that ability. It's so dangerous with the overlap of Crushing Stomp, and so if you do not have one of those bleed cleanses, defensives are going to be very important when you get the overlap with the Crushing Stomp and the bleed. So those are very, very important, and that's probably where you're going to end up losing people on this boss, those wombo combos of the bleed and the Crushing Stomp. So just keep that in mind. That's the most dangerous part of the fight. Moving forward here is where you get to do some nice big pulls. Custodians are relatively easy to deal with. Just watch the cleaves. Make sure you face the pack away. The wardens here, or the weavers rather, they have one stop in the Hail of Stone, which you want to make sure that you have something designated to prevent, and otherwise they're just going to be spamming kicks on the tank. So we do something crazy here because it's Tyrannical Week and we had Bloodlust up. So we added a third pack to this. Honestly, maybe you could do this on a 4-week. You probably don't want to. You probably would just do this in 2 pulls where you would do this double pull and then you would do this left side with the right side as a double pull. That's what I would recommend. But because it's a Tyrannical Week and we had Bloodlust up at this timing, we just sent a quadruple pull here. But obviously, maybe not ideal. I don't think we die here. But basically, there's not a ton you need to worry about. So we, again, like I said, we have a Purge. We have Mass Dispel, so it's not a big deal if any of these shields go out, but also stoppable. The thing you really want to stop are the Weavers. Their stop is super important. Their kick, less important. It's tank damage, but it's not the end of the world. Similarly, Custodians only do the cleave tank damage. So the only really big kick, at least for our comp in particular, is actually on the Wardens, their Curse of Stone, because the only way we have to clear that are Tiger's Lust and Freedom, because it is considered as slow, so it's a curse, but it's also slow. So Freedom and Tiger's Lust can clear those, but we don't have a Curse to spell, right? So those are really our only ways to clear them. So those are the pretty important ones to stop or kick. And again, both those casts on that mob, the shield as well as the curse, are stoppable and kickable here. But you're going to see I'm going to have to commit pretty much every defensive CD in the book, including Bubble Taunt, including chaining my Ancient Kings, including proccing my Ancient Kings, right? So that's a pretty dangerous pull. That's not going to happen on 4 week, and definitely not going to happen without Bloodlust, that kind of thing, or even on a higher Tyrannical key. Honestly, it's probably a little sus. You'd probably just double and then double instead of doing a quadruple. But you know, it went better than expected. I'm not going to lie to you. Anyways, we're probably going to start training at the end of this. We move on, and this is a relatively scary golem here. So this Runic Protector is the only one you fight in the whole dungeon. That Fissuring Slam goes down. You want to make sure you're not in that puddle, because that puddle is a damage amp to players, especially when this Earthquake goes out. It's not LOSable in any way, unlike the golems later on in the dungeon. It has like an 100-yard range or something crazy like that, so you kind of have to eat this. And so this is where, especially on 4 weeks, you're like, okay, we want to nuke this Runic Protector down. We want to make sure we're alternating, defensives, healing CDs, whatever it is to get that guy down. And these Weavers cannot be channeling during an Earthquake, or you are in for a very, very bad time, right? You do not want that overlap whatsoever. So this is probably one of the more dangerous pulls on a 4 week, just because you have no way really around that Earthquake damage, at least currently. I felt like it was LOSable on PTR, but here on live, it seems like it's not LOSable anymore, which is unfortunate for sure. Maybe just using the rooms wrong. But anyways, we have the animal pull here. Skittering Crawlers will just do a little pounce damage to people. Stack up a poison on your tank, which does actually tick fairly hard, so you want to dispel that. Poison dispels are pretty good in this dungeon for literally this alone, so keep that in mind. Otherwise, a kick or a stop on the 3 bats. And this pull is pretty free to pull literally everything at once. You see, we did actually chain the Runic Protector in here because we're crazy again. And it's also a Tyrannical weakened on a Fort Weak, so it's not too dangerous. Not a ton of other damage going out here. Fissuring Slam, note that it only does damage to the tank. It's just a damage amp to anyone in the puddle, so keep that in mind. Not everyone's going to take damage when that goes out. Don't be scared. It's the Earthquake you need to be scared of. But finishing off this relatively easy pack here. And then we have Emberon. And Emberon is a boss that is very tough if you don't have a priest in your group. This dungeon, for sure, by the way, is just priest central. So basically, Searing Clap goes out on the tank. Boom, magic dot on every single player that lasts 10 seconds. So obviously, Mass Dispel is kind of insane. Having a priest is really, really good. In terms of positioning here, you can see, basically, I took the boss, I turned him one direction, and we're going to go around the ring this way. And then everyone else is on the opposite side of the boss, so they're not worried about the frontal. And we have a lot of room to sidestep or move back or whatever for these actual fire orbs here. We're not too worried about space. For example, like if you're trying to tank up against this wall, all of a sudden you're crunched in by the wall on one side and it's problematic. This is going to be the big group damage here. If you ever get hit by a ball anytime near this, you're dead for sure. So you really need to make sure that you are avoiding all these balls, especially when the extra damage is coming out, because it is actually just instant death. And you see I'm just slowly kind of moving around here, avoiding the balls, spreading for these circles, and making sure that the frontal is never facing anyone else. And then we have the priest getting ready basically to Mass Dispel whenever they can. I believe we were too spread there. Yeah, we were a little too spread there. So that's the other thing. When you're playing with a priest for this specific fight, you want to make sure that you are closer together. Actually, it might have been, no, he did have it up. Okay, he had it. We were definitely a little too spread there. Like, look where we are, right? A little too far. So just keep that in mind. If you're playing with a priest, they can get all these, but you want to make sure that you are positioned in such a way that you're getting at least the 4 people that aren't the tank, right? Not the end of the world if the tank kind of eats it, but it's a lot of excess damage here for everyone else. So keep that in mind. Then we go into this phase. We just want to make sure we're all on the same side here, and we're just splitting, killing these Vault Keepers. Honestly, it didn't even really matter. I think literally the rogue actually cloaked through and went on the opposite side of us right now. So we're actually on different sides right now, but it's not really a big deal because the pulsing damage in this phase actually isn't too scary. Note that the fire orbs, you might have seen the tail end of one there. They do still exist in this phase for at least the beginning of it, so be careful you don't get like auto one-shot running to the edge or something like that. But otherwise, just run around in a circle. Ideally, all of us on the same side, but as you can see, it's not too dangerous, at least with our comp, to have the rogue and the evoker away. And then it's just a repeat from there. So you're going to see I'm going to pull him off to the edge a little bit. There goes the Mass Dispel, gets everyone. And now I've turned him, and we do the same thing. So the entire party's on that side. And I'm going to be slowly moving around this way, just making sure that we're spreading, dodging orbs, facing the boss away from the party, and just kind of rinse and repeats from there. I don't actually think the damage is high enough on this fight, at least with a priest, that you want to commit Bloodlust on it, which is why we did that big Bloodlust earlier, because you really want to Bloodlust the last boss for sure. Now, let's go through here. Trash. Ebonstone Golems, the new golems in this place. These guys have a pretty nasty hit, especially on Fortified, but it is LOSable, and you will want to make use of LOS here. So I'm going to pull up all these mobs here, and I'm going to drag it back to this corner right here, and that gives everyone the ability to actually LOS. You can see the range can stand up here, tap these guys, and just step back to LOS. Melee, similarly, can be in this pack here, and step outside this corner to LOS. I don't know that we're going to do that on this pull here, but that is the reasoning for the positioning here on fortified keys in particular, or just higher keys in general. This is a nice spot for you to be able to actually LOS all these guys. Note there are 4 weavers in this pull though, so that is where all of your stops are focused on. Everyone here, I think we've assigned weavers with head markers for stops. We also have AoE stops that are mixed in as well to help out. Also, keep in mind there is a single cleave in this pack, so beware. That's why I'm directly in this corner here, and the melee are on the outside, not only for LOS, but also to not be cleaved. Fast forward here, basically we just run through this whole area, pick up all these mobs, pick up all these guys in the corner, and drag these Ebonstones into the corner. Similar idea here. The big thing here is waiting for this to go out. I probably could have put it in a little bit of a better spot, honestly, but again, because we're ignoring LOS right now, it's not a big deal. But you'd probably want to drop this blessing like back here and then pull up a little bit and onto the stairs where you can LOS much easier. Similarly, there is a ton of cleaves in this pack, so only 1 cleave in the last pack, but you can see all the custodians here. There's at least, what, 4, maybe 5 in this pack. And then you just have the double kick warden guys who have both the shield cast and the curse cast. So be aware of those. Much less dangerous stops in this pack. It's almost all custodians with the 2 golems. There is also the one, of course, big guy who has the tank buster. But that's about it here. And so this spot is not great for LOSing. Like I said, up here is probably the play if you want to do the LOS stuff around this pillar or around the door into the next boss area. So that's where you would want to be. But because there's no extra raid damage from the caster guys that had stops, we're not really worried about it on a tyrannical key of this key level. So we're just nuking. But again, fortified keys, higher keys in general, you probably do want to make use of this area here. Like this is probably where you would tank it for a couple easy LOS areas. Anyways, though, we are chaining because why not? There's still 2 golems up, but they're almost dead. But let's add a 3rd golem because why not, of course. Again, just be aware. Don't get absolutely nuked by these guys. I believe they can never cast Thunderous Clap at the same time. I believe they have that logic. They're all just going to chain Thunderous Clap. That is at least one nice thing about it. As soon as we get these 2 down, we'll go to the next pack here. And we are almost done count, and we are going to be skipping some stuff at the end because the end trash is kind of a giant pain. No new trash mobs here. Moving forward, as soon as that blessing comes out, we chain again. And basically, as soon as this Ebonstone Golem dies is when we'll chain again, I believe here. Aggro rip there, very unfortunate. So this is we're gonna kill this Golem, gonna battle res, and then we're going to then go into the big guy, because those big guys are probably one of the scarier mobs in the entire dungeon, especially at this point. With a priest, they're not too bad here, because you have that magic dispel that you can mass dispel again. But if you don't have a priest, you can LOS it. And so how this works basically is you're going to see at about 1 second, boom, it refreshes this debuff on them and it puts it on everyone else as well. So just after it ticks 1, boom, it refreshes on everyone. So that's kind of the timing. Again, I have to move here because of that blessing, so I'll move to this corner here so you can use that LOS again to your advantage. Use these corners, use these pillars. A lot of mechanics that are dangerous in the last part of the dungeon can be abused with LOS. So if you're using them here, again, pulling them over here. So if people, we don't have the mass spell for another 10 seconds, people are still able to use the LOS here to get their haste back, to remove their dot, whatever it is, and you just need to dip in for like literally a second. Like when it ticks 2, dip in, wait a second, dip out when the buff refreshes, and you're good. Here we are going to do one more pull here, and pretty straightforward. I think actually our goal is to probably try and skip this Time Reaver. You could probably do it with like a Mind Soothe and having the priest pull some of the whelps on the side here. That's probably what the play is going to be, to only ever pull that one Time Reaver up at the top of the stairs, and then we just have this agent and like all the whelps or something like that. But similar idea here. You can LOS around this corner right here. If I was a little bit more in the corner, you could also LOS around this corner, but either works. And if you have a priest, obviously it's not a big deal. And then we get to the skip here at the end, which actually is doable in a lot of different ways. So we're just going to Soothe and Shroud because we have a rogue. If you didn't have a rogue and you had a priest and a warlock, the warlock can Soothe and Fade up here. And they can then stand up here. And maintaining the Mind Soothe, they can life grip a warlock. And the warlock can lock gate down. And then everyone can lock gate up to this area here and just walk around. Assuming, again, the Soothe is maintained. So you don't need to invis skip these guys. If you have a priest and a warlock, or if you have a rogue. Even a rogue solo can do this, by the way. You don't need the priest to do a rogue skip here. But I recommend skipping them. They're very healthy. They can get pretty dangerous even with a priest in your group. They're just annoying. They're just not worth the time or the count, in my opinion. And then you get to the last boss here, which on Tyrannical Week is probably the scarier one in the entire dungeon. We're lusting on it, and we're pulling over it in this corner here. So the big thing to note is that the swirlies here are baited near player positions, which is why initially you're going to see us all kind of together. Not only for that, but also for the mass dispel here, because there is the 3-man magic debuff. Now, time sinks. This is the debuff. Something to note about time sync. This is not only a magic debuff, but it's also a slow. So like I mentioned earlier in the dungeon, Freedom will clear it. Tiger's Lust will clear it. Shape-shifting from a druid will clear it. Anything that clears those things will clear this debuff as well. So it's not necessarily only magic dispels that can clear it. So keep that in mind. Those can all be very useful as well. But again, we're clustering all kind of generally together for those mass dispels, for baiting these puddles. And I'm basically always facing the boss towards the close walls or outer edge of the room for these frontal cones, and I'm just kind of sidestepping, shimmying up as we need more space, and then making sure for this rewind time flow cast that I have the boss positioned near the puddles so that melee DPS can have uptime while also being in the haste buff here, and then it's kind of just a repeat from there, right? Baiting to the side, trying to fill in the space. As you can see, we're filling in the space as much as possible, baiting as close to the previous circles as we can, just to maximize the amount of space, stepping in here for the rewind time flows. And then you're going to see me turn towards the edge of the wall here, because there's immediately going to be a frontal cone out of this. So there's the frontal cone here. Everyone knows it's safe. I'm into the wall, and then we slowly move because this is going to start filling up again. So I'm going to back up a little bit, back up a little bit. Boss movement can sometimes be sketchy. And then there we go. That's a good spot. Melee have space. I have space. Frontal's not going to hit anyone. And you can see here the ranger slowly filling in behind us. And we're basically just going to go clockwise around this room here. I'm just going to go in a giant circle. And this, you would be surprised how much more time baiting like this buys you. Like, we have so much time on this boss fight where we're not struggling for space just because we're doing such good baits. And look, he's even going backwards here to bait in this old space that we're probably not going to get much use out of. Melee are baiting here as close as they can to previous puddles. It buys you so much time to actually fight this boss in safety. And then again, just make sure you bring the boss back for the rewind time flow. Now, in terms of damage patterns, the scariest part of the fight is definitely this debuff overlapping with the wing buffet, which I believe happens early on after a rewind time flow here. So you can see what's wing buffet into debuff there. That's not super scary. Rewind time flow, honestly, the damage here isn't super scary either, especially because your healer also gets juiced with the haste debuff. So you can see here, right, taking it in, getting ready to position him facing away for the frontal that comes out immediately after. There's the frontal. You're going to get a wing buffet into the debuffs here. And this is kind of where the damage is, like, if you didn't top up people immediately, it can be problematic. If you don't get a dispel relatively quick, it can also lead into rot damage into the next wing buffet. But basically that wing buffet hit is the big nasty hit. So whenever there's an overlap with anything, that's kind of when you're scared of people getting wombo comboed and dying. So keep that in mind. If you want a defensive something, the best defensive is a wing buffet. That is for sure the best defensive. And then just try and remove as many time sinks as you can, whether that's with a magic dispel or a slow/snare removal ability. Anything works here. And as you can see, like, we're like 2.5 minutes into this fight, and we still have like a third of the room left to use. We're back in the time stuff. I'm going to go into the corner after this. We have so much room, and that's just because of good baiting. Baiting gets you so far on this fight, so it's very important. Make sure you guys are doing that. That's it for this video, guys. Hopefully it helps you time some high Uldaman keys, and if it does, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like it, including advanced guides for every single Season 2 dungeon. If you have any questions here, feel free to drop those down in the comments below, or you can come stop by my stream at Tactics over on Twitch, where I do high keys and mythic rating from a tank's perspective, and ask me there. Of course, I have to give a big thank you to all of my supporters over on Patreon. I appreciate every single one of you guys. Otherwise, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.